I'm just messing with you guys. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Wednesday night Bible study here at Faith Baptist Church's Facebook Live. So glad to see everybody's names popping up in the comments and the chat section, whichever platform you're watching this on. Happy Wednesday, Aunt Rhonda. We appreciate your prayers, and we are praying for you and yours as well. Hello, Sylvia. Good to see your name pop up in the comments as well. And over on YouTube also. You guys double dipping this evening. I appreciate that. I want to say thank you for the like to Sylvia on Facebook.
That's me. You don't want
I appreciate that. And those who maybe don't get the notification on Facebook or YouTube, Amanda puts out for the GroupMe crowd a link to the stream as well. So here in a second, should see some more people hopping in, but we are glad to see everybody this evening. Good evening, Ryan. Good to see your name pop up as well. I appreciate all the support, you guys. Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot in the way of updates or prayer requests or so forth. Thank you so much for liking the stream. I appreciate that. I need to get that on the pre-show as well. I don't know why it's not. I guess because it interrupts some of the notices and prayer requests and so forth. So we don't want to interrupt, but yeah, we appreciate you guys and your support. Let me just double check on our prayer requests real quick, and we'll make sure that we're all, oh, yes, good to go on our updates and prayer requests and so forth. So, when was this? Yeah, on the 26th, which was just a couple of days ago.
Monday.
Yeah, so Monday, we were praying for Jeremiah, who was in the ER with some chest pain. Those of you who have physically been here, you know Jeremiah. He's been here quite a few times. If you know Miss Christie, that's her grandson, Liliana's brother. Don't know how else to describe him. But he's having some chest pain. He was in the emergency room, and they said it was pulled muscles in his chest. So I didn't mean to leave you in suspense there, but I was trying to find the exact correct information. So he had some pulled muscles in his chest, and Miss Christie said that he is off from school until the 28th.
Today.
So he's going to be back in school tomorrow. Yeah. So just be in prayer for him that he's managing, whatever it is that he's going through well. And we'll just be in prayer for him. If you guys have a prayer request, something you want us to pray for, leave a comment. I'm going to read it out loud for everybody. If we've already gotten started with the Bible study, don't worry about interrupting. Absolutely leave those comments. We appreciate them, and they actually do help out. So tonight we're continuing on in the Hall of Faith, and we're up to Jacob, whose name is now Israel. Yeah, you're in our lesson tonight. Isn't that cool? Not really you, but your namesake. Yeah. So I'm going to jump over to the Bible study cam. There we go. All right, let me make sure my microphone is being heard. I don't know if you Facebook friends can. Yes, you can. Okay, great. All right. So we're in Genesis 48 right now. We're going to come back to Genesis 48 because, of course, we're in Hebrews 11, actually. So we're looking at Hebrews 11. I don't think that was pertinent, but let me make sure. Oh, okay. So, yeah, okay. So we, let's see, where were we at? Huh? I thought I heard somebody say something. All right, anyway, so last week we were talking about this right here in verse 20. We were talking about, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. And we broke that down and hit it on a deeper level. Thank you so much, J.W. Christie Hendricks, for liking the stream as well. I appreciate that. And hello to you as well. Yeah, so last week we were talking about Isaac and his blessing of Jacob and Esau. And people usually say that Jacob stole Esau's blessing, which, when you really think about it, how can you steal a blessing? right? So what we broke down and talked about was the fact that Jacob was destined for that blessing all along, and sort of the conflicting ideals on that. If you missed that lesson, go back and check it out. We broke that story down really well, and it's a pretty good, enjoyable lesson. I enjoyed rewatching it anyways, so hopefully you do as well. Okay, so verse 21 is where we're at this week, and it says, by faith Jacob, who is now a grown man with a family, and he's near the end of his life in his own rights. It says, by faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshipped leaning upon the top of his staff. So we are going to be talking about this particular story this evening. We're going to break this down because it's a portion of, I assume that's still the GroupMe chat going off. Okay. This is, I do want to very quickly remind everybody that the GroupMe is for prayer requests and updates. So if you want to have a conversation with somebody, there are groups that we can make for that kind of thing, absolutely. But I don't want to spam people's chats in the GroupMe because it will encourage those other people who don't want to chat to mute that chat thing and not see the prayer requests. So I don't want that. So we can absolutely make another one if we want one just to kind of talk to each other. Something we can discuss later on. Anyway. So this is the story we're going to be talking about. It's a story that a lot of people don't know about because it's not something that's discussed a whole lot in Sunday school with kids, right? So a lot of adults are not super familiar with this story. We kind of stop talking about Joseph after he reunites with his family, and then we say he lived happily ever after, the end, and we pick up there with baby Moses. Right? That's kind of the way it's taught. It says, okay, Joseph's story is over, reunited with his dad, they lived happily ever after, and then, hey, here's this baby Moses in Egypt. And then if you're paying attention to the story, you kind of get, you either disassociate where it's like, okay, there's this story, and then there's this story, or you kind of get whiplash, and you're like, how did we get in Egypt? Why are we here? What happened? Who's Moses? Like, how is he related to the family? And there's a whole bunch of information you miss by skipping from one to the other. One of that is Genesis 48, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So let's go ahead and jump over there to Genesis chapter 48, where we had a second ago. Right, and right here in verse 1, it says, it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, his father, Jacob, whose name was now Israel, was old enough where being sick in that day and age was like sort of a signing his death warrant, if you will. It meant the end was near, right? And so that's what he finds out, is that his dad is sick. So his response to that is to take his two sons. He's only got two sons, evidently. And he takes his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, this is where the more biblically scholarly of you will notice those names may sound familiar to you. If you've read through your Bible a good bit, you might think those names are ringing a bell. And if you're not, you didn't go through like schooling of the Bible and so forth, you might think that's ringing a bell, but I don't know why. But if you maybe have been going to church for, a couple decades or something like that, or you've read through your Bible a couple of times, that kind of person will immediately know where Manasseh and Ephraim are from, right? So we're going to explain that here in just a second. But just for right now, understand those are just Joseph's two boys. Right? And one told Jacob and said, behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. So now Jacob, lying on what will probably wind up being his deathbed, said, behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. So now he knows he's got an important job. Right? He knows what is going to happen, because the blessing has transferred from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, right? That blessing of the Abrahamic covenant has passed down from generation to generation to generation. Now, the Abrahamic covenant in its messianic form is not being passed down here because all 12 sons, or I'm sorry, all of his boys, I think there is 13 sons. Well, anyway, the number has left my brain because there's Benjamin, and then the stuff we're fixing to talk about with Jacob, it always confuses my brain a little bit on the math. But suffice it to say that all of his boys will become a tribe of Israel in their own right. So maybe as you read through the Bible, you may have heard of the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, this tribe and that tribe and so forth. And you say, what on earth is that about? Well, think of the tribes of Israel like the states of America, right? So you have Texas, that's where I live. You have Oklahoma, that's where other people live. Surrounding us and all over, we have the 50 United States, right? And each one is like they have their own identity within the overall country of America, right? And that's kind of what it was like for Israel and its tribes. You had these 12 different tribes that each member of the nation of Israel would be a citizen of this tribe, of that tribe, of that tribe, and so forth and so on. So each one of those tribes is named after one of the sons of Jacob or Israel, right? So the prophecy is being fulfilled and carried on by all the sons, right? So there doesn't need to be another handing down of the blessing because the blessing is going to all of them, right? They're all going to become Israel, the nation, not the person. So what's being talked about here, what's about to be talked about, is something unique and different is going to take place. That this particular blessing is going to skip a generation. Right? So let's read, and maybe you'll see what I mean. In verse 3 it says, Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me. And said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful, and multiply thee. I will make of thee a multitude of people. I will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. So he's talking about when God explained to him his part in this story, as it were, so that they understand, that he understands now what this blessing was, what it really meant, because when he received the blessing from his father as his father was passing away, or he was in his old age anyways, that there was a blessing, but it wasn't really clear to him what that blessing was. He just knew that blessing is something good, and I want that. And that's as far as his understanding went. So then he becomes a man in his own right, gets married, starts a family, so forth, and through the course of time, God explains to him what this blessing is and the responsibility of it, right? It's kind of like I tell my kids, growing up is a blessing and also a responsibility, right? Because as you get up older, you have less authority figures over you, right? So as a very young child, you have parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles you all have to listen to. You have teachers and principals and coaches and all kinds of people that are constantly telling you what to do. And the older you get, the more you come out from under those people. You know, you graduate from school, maybe you're still under the authority of your parents. You become an adult, you get a job, you take over the responsibility for yourself, and you no longer are under their authorities anymore. But that also comes with some responsibility as well, right? You got to get the job, you got to pay the bills, you got to do those adult responsibility things. You know, you got to pay for the car, pay for the insurance, all of that stuff. But with the responsibility also comes the freedoms that come with it. So it's kind of the same thing with blessings from the Lord as well. They are a tremendous, joyful honor. But at the same time, and especially here for Jacob, for whose name was changing into Israel, it is also a responsibility, right? And you can kind of see that in that he's sort of carrying on the torch of his father's and his father's father. And now it's his job to properly pass it down to his children as well, prepare them for this. He's sort of defining who God's people are going to be based on how he raises his children. That's an incredible responsibility. So he's explaining this to Jacob and to Joseph and to Manasseh and to Ephraim, right? And then in verse 5, instead of saying, and now thee, he says, and now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. And thy issue which thou begettest after them shall be mine, and they shall be called after the name of their brethren in their inheritance. So the blessing of Israel is passing Joseph and is going to Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, the question becomes, why? Because you may have noticed as you're studying the different tribes of Israel, there's the, tribe of Benjamin and the tribe, this tribe, after every one of those sons. The tribe of Judah and so forth, which is the tribe that Christ would come out of, is the tribe of Judah. But there is no tribe of Joseph. You ever wondered that? You ever wonder why? This story is why. Instead of it going to Joseph, it goes to Ephraim and it goes to Manasseh. And he says, your children will be known as the children of Israel. They'll be known as my boys. Your boys will be my boys. And so forth. And what does he mean by that? Well, what he means by that is they're going to inherit the blessing instead of Joseph. Right? They're going to be a part of that multitudes as the sands of the sea, as the stars in the sky. That Abrahamic covenant is going to pass to them instead of passing to Joseph. Now, the Bible never explains fully and completely why this is, but I think there's a couple of reasons for it. I think number one is that Joseph didn't need the blessing, right? Because he's already second in command over all of Egypt, right? He's built this incredible life for himself, and he didn't feel like he was being left out. Right? If it went to his boys instead of to him, that wasn't going to offend him. That wasn't going to bother him. He was fine with whatever needed to be done. So he had that level of humility where he wasn't going to make a scene or cause a fuss or feel jealous because he didn't get what everybody else got. He was fine. But I think also, secondly, is because he had so associated himself with Egypt. Now, in his situation, again, there's nothing wrong with him being associated with Egypt, because the Bible clearly says that God was using Joseph to save many people alive through all of the harrowing experience that he went through. So it's not as though, well, you associate with Egypt, so now you can't have the blessing. That's not really the spirit of it at all. But the tribes of Israel are going to go through this whole experience in the exodus of Egypt into the promised land. And they're going to, you can see in the book of Exodus, they go through this whole process of having to unlearn their Egyptian ways and relearn the ways of God and his people. Right? As a matter of fact, if you read through Genesis, when Jacob's family goes to move into Egypt with him, they can't move into Egypt itself. They can't move into the main city with Joseph. They can't live there with him because the Egyptians are racist towards shepherds. Literally, that's what the Bible says. That even Pharaoh was like, you're going to live in this town outside, away from everybody else, because if they know you're shepherds, they're going to give you a really hard time. So this whole village is going to be for you and your family. Right? And that spirit was already there way back in the days of Joseph. But Joseph, even his own brothers didn't recognize him, right? They just assumed he was one of the other Egyptians. He looked like an Egyptian. He sounded like an Egyptian. He was more associated with Egypt than he was with Jacob and Israel in the promised land anymore. So this blessing can't go to somebody so tied up in Egyptian culture, because in the Bible, Egypt is a picture of the world. That's the reason for it. And God's people have to come out of that worldly state in order to be one of God's children. It's sort of like living in this other culture, almost. It's not a different culture, and it's not as though you shouldn't go out and live amongst the world. You absolutely should be a light in the darkness. But it's like when you become a Christian, it's almost like you become and you inherit and assimilate into yourself this completely different way of seeing and living life altogether. And that's exactly what it is. You take on, it's more than just a new life philosophy. It's a whole culture and a whole way of doing things and seeing things that is maybe a bit strange and different than the way the rest of the world sees and does things. And so Jacob cannot receive the blessing because he's so entangled in all of this Egyptian culture and is so high up on the food chain and so forth that Manasseh and Ephraim, being younger, they are able to assimilate this thing a little better, and they have less of that pedigree that their father has of authority and so forth coming from Pharaoh and all of that. And so they become the tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, you may have heard the phrase half-tribe mentioned with one of those, and we're going to talk about that. So he says, "Now thy two sons Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. Reuben and Simeon, or as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine," which were his oldest two boys. "Thy issue which thou begettest after them shall be thine, and shall be called after the name of their brethren in their inheritance." Right? So that's what we're talking about. Not literally. He's not adopting his children to himself literally. This is in reference to the inheritance, that blessing, that promise that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. So then he says in verse 7, "As for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when yet there was but a little way to come unto Ephrath. And I buried her there in the way of Ephrath, the same is Bethlehem." So, and I have a whole lesson that I do on this phrase right here, which is huge, in that another reason Joseph may not have received that blessing of being a tribe, even though Benjamin did, so that's probably not the case. But it's this thing of Rachel versus Leah, or her sister, right? Because you remember the story that Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah instead of Rachel. Right? And he wanted Rachel, but he was stuck with Leah. And he didn't love Leah, he didn't want Leah, but he stayed married to her and then just had two wives, which is a terrible way to treat a woman. It's an awful way to treat a woman, that you're collecting them like cattle. And for some reason in the Bible, it's okay to marry multiple wives, but it's not okay for a wife to marry multiple husbands. You know, that just doesn't make sense. Something's not adding up there. And so it's been my belief that he should not have married Rachel in the first place. And I have a whole sermon I do on this, and this is part of it. For one, Jesus comes from the tribe of Judah. So you eliminate Ephraim, Manasseh, and the tribe of Benjamin, and there's not a whole lot of historical significance in that. Benjamin plays a large role in the splitting of the northern kingdoms from the southern kingdoms, which I would argue God wasn't in a real big favor of in the first place. But also, it's always the tribes of Benjamin and Judah. So you eliminate Benjamin, you still got the separation of the north from the south. And another reason I say that he shouldn't have married Rachel is this right here. Because when Rachel died, she was buried in Bethlehem. Right? She was buried along the way. When Leah died, she was buried in the same place that Jacob would be buried. So Jacob and Leah were buried together in the same cave that Abraham and Sarah were buried, and in the same place that Isaac and Rebekah were buried. So his grandfather and grandmother, his mother and father, him and Leah, not Rachel. Right? So this is all to say that Joseph was beloved of his father and so forth, but might have been overcompensating for the fact that all the other ones were the sons of Leah and didn't want Joseph to feel like he was less of a son. So maybe favored him a little bit more than he should have. But this is an important aspect to this whole thing about the blessing and so forth. Is this thing of Joseph and his sons and not him, and it all kind of fits together pretty well. In verse 8, Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, "Who are these?" So remember that Joseph had these boys while living in Egypt before he's reunited with his family. So there was a lot of life being lived between the time he fell in that pit and the time that they reunited. A lot of life had taken place. So Jacob never really got to spend much time with Joseph's sons. So they come to him. He's in his old age. He says, "Who are these?" And Joseph said unto his father, "These are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place." And he said, "Bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them." So here we're coming to that blessing that keeps being passed down. But again, like I said, all the sons are being blessed. So it's not the same blessing that he received. And it says in verse 8, "Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age." So I was saying a second ago, they could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. So he can't see which son is which, and they've just told him which son is which. But that's going to be important for what we're about to read. "Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face." He's saying to him here, and this is it's important because it grabs you emotionally, what you're about to read. What we're about to read, he's saying, I thought there was a time in my life where I was sure I would never again see the face of my son. Imagine, just live in that place for a second. Something you love so much that it aches. And have that precious beloved thing ripped away from you before the time appointed. Unfairly, in the prime of his life. He was trying to learn to live beyond losing his son forever. "And lo, God hath showed me also thy seed." And not only did he get that boy back, not only did he wind up going to Egypt out of desperation, and then getting his son back again. You imagine that? You've lost him. He's dead. He's gone. And then you see him in the marketplace, and you see him in the road somewhere down the way. And you embrace each other and you love each other again. And not only did he get to see his son again, but he got to see his son as a man and become a father and see his children, thy seed also. What a tremendous blessing Israel was sure he'd never get. It's an amazing thing when we think we know the path our life is going to take. You expect to accept the way that life is. I've got to be happy where I'm at. I've got to be happy with the way things are because it's probably never going to change for me. And then one day, it all does. David was perfectly happy in that that Philistine city, that place of Ziklag. He was perfectly content to live there for the rest of his life. That's the way he thought it was going to happen. And then lo and behold, tragedy strikes. Saul and his sons are slain on the battlefield. Israel's without a king, without an heir. There's nobody left to inherit the throne. Saul had one crippled son left who was unfortunately unable to rule as a king in Israel. So now they gotta take David. He's the only one who can bring back order to this chaos. So he moves from Ziklag into the king's house. And that's a tremendous story. It is just like with Israel and his son Joseph here. It's a beautiful thing to see God exceed our expectations. Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, like standing in front of somebody, and brought them near unto him. So if I'm, putting Jacob this direction, you've got your hands out, and I'm putting Jacob this direction and Lizzie this direction, my left hand is your right hand, and my right hand is your left hand. I think we got it right. Yeah. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid his hand on Ephraim's head, who was the younger. Right? And this is lesson learned and also relearned here. Pay attention to what's about to happen. His left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly. For Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day. Do you think God ever magically placed food on the ground for him to pick up? No, he did not. Where did he get food? He got food that he grew. He got food from the animals he raised. He got food that he paid for, that he worked for, that he earned it, that somebody else grew, that somebody else raised and butchered and prepared for him and his family to eat. But yet here he says that God fed him all his life long unto that day. And how is that? Well, in so many ways. You could say, first of all, God created the earth that provides the food. God created the animals that become food, created the people that provide the food for him to pay for. But also beyond and more than that, that any time there was a struggle and any time times got hard, that God made sure that Israel and his family were never without food. He kept them and preserved them and watched over them, that there was always an opportunity to be fed coming by his door all the time that he needed it, and as much as he needed. And God blesses us in the same way. As Americans, we get used to having. There's probably very few people alive as Americans today who don't know what it's like to have nowhere to go to eat. Now, I do realize that America has a very extreme homeless problem and very extreme poverty issues. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like they don't exist. I know they exist, and I know they're a bigger problem than they should be. And I know that there are people that take more than their fair share and are causing these issues and just don't care about it. Those people will receive what they've earned. But I will tell you this. America is also one of the best about creating ministries, creating nonprofit organizations that go out of their way to trying their best to provide food for even those people that can't afford food for themselves. You know, if you can't afford food, you're trying, you're making some money, but you're not making enough. The government itself has, what are they called? Programs, we'll call them. Set up so that people who, instead of going hungry and starving to death, can get a little bit of help from the government, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't let anybody fool you. Everybody needs help every once in a while. We all do. There's no shame in taking that help. Don't ever let somebody make you feel bad for that. You know, but that's an opportunity that people have in our country that doesn't exist in other countries. And even more than that, there are churches and just like, you know, soup kitchens and food pantries around the whole country that try to feed people who can't feed themselves. All kinds of organizations and things like that. And sometimes people's pride or just a lack of knowledge keeps people from these places. But they exist. And they exist in a way that they don't exist in other places around the world or didn't exist back in history. Not to the degree that we have them today anyways. And so to have food is a blessing that we take for granted. Because I imagine anybody watching this is watching it because you have a smartphone or you have access to a computer, which tells me you probably are doing well off enough to have, you know, a can of beans at least in the pantry. Or you have somebody who's providing that can of beans for you, in which case that's also a blessing. Can I just, I'm gonna rabbit trail for just a second. Please don't feel guilty about that. Okay, because there are going to be people out there who tell you, you need to provide. You need to figure out a way to make it your own way. You need to get out of the house of the person helping you, whether it's grandparents or aunts and uncles or moms and dads. You need to get out of their house. You need to find a way to make the money to pay your own bills and make your own way and stop, you know, slumming off of everybody else. And those people are privileged snobs who don't understand the way the world works anymore, who come from a time where they had it rough at one point in their life, and I struggled, and I found a job, and I worked my way up the ladder, and I learned to pay my own way. That's great. It's not 1984 anymore. It's not 1994 anymore. It's not 2004 anymore. It's been 20 years since things worked that way. Nowadays, I would tell you, from the people in this community just next to me, I can tell you firsthand, if they're paying all of their bills by themselves, they are having to give up their dreams and work a job that they hate and have at least 2 full-time jobs in that house before they can pay their own way. And it's got to be a good job, and it's got to be both of them working a good job. Okay, it doesn't work that way anymore. Used to, you watch, these shows, watch Family Matters or, Boy Meets World or, all of these shows with like these, family dynamics, home improvement and stuff. There would be the husband went out and worked a job, the wife stayed at home. And as the closer you got toward the end of the 90s, the wife would go out and get a job too as the kids were older because she wanted to. Right? Not because they were struggling or suffering or needed her to, but because it's what she wanted. And, she's a strong, independent woman and she wants her own, sort of career and so forth. And I think that's great, except that's just not how it works anymore. Nowadays, she's got to work out of necessity. And if you were in that position tonight, you're struggling, you're suffering, don't let somebody make you feel bad about it. Okay? Because no matter how you're getting food on the table, that's God providing it. Whether it's the husband or whether it's the wife, whether it's a combination of the two, whether you've got other people helping you out, don't feel bad about those things. Because any way you slice it, these guys who say, I worked my way up there and I paid my own way and I did it myself. No, you didn't. God opened doors for you. God provided opportunities for you. You didn't do anything. I hate to tell you that. I hate to burst your little pride bubble there. You didn't do a blessed thing. God opened doors for you while I walked through the doors. Well, hey, that's great. Anybody can walk through a door, though. That didn't make you special. It didn't make you better than anybody else. We could all walk through that door. Thing is, you had one open. Nobody else did. I'm off my soapbox. Don't let people make you feel bad about that, because God is the one that provides for us. And we're privileged, is the point I'm trying to get at. Because when we eat, and we're able to eat, most of us, 3 meals a day, man, that's a blessing. And Israel knew that. And that's what he's saying here. All the days of my life, God fed me. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. And let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. That's why you hear about Ephraim and Manasseh and so forth, but you don't hear about Joseph, right? Because he's saying, they will inherit my name instead, which is an even greater blessing. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he held up his father's hand and removed it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused, and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. You've heard of Ephraim and the half-tribe of Manasseh, right? You've heard that before? Ephraim and the half-tribe Manasseh. It's mentioned a few times throughout the Bible, Ephraim and the half-tribe Manasseh. This is why, right? For the same reason. And we're getting into that lesson, learned, forgotten, and learned again. Last week, a lesson was learned. That destiny had chosen the younger brother over the older brother. And the tradition is that the oldest one goes first. That's tradition. The oldest one goes first. Now, if you're talking about, I don't know, front seat privileges, yeah, I agree. Eldest goes first. Put that youngest one in at the same time, there might be an accident issue, right? They could get hurt. But if you're talking about something that doesn't matter even more than that, you're talking about like who opens their Christmas presents first or something, and you go oldest to you. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're talking about determining the course of events or the future of people's lives, and the only decision you're making is based off of who gets my inheritance, based off of who's the oldest, you're not involving God in that. You're not making godly decisions, right? And that's what that's what Joseph, that's what Joseph is doing here. No, you got to give this blessing to the oldest, because oldest first, which is ironic, because Joseph's the youngest. Well, second youngest. He didn't know about Benjamin. Joseph's nowhere near the oldest, and yet he's like, no, oldest first. And Jacob is teaching Joseph a lesson that Jacob learned with his father Isaac. Because remember, Isaac did the same thing. He's saying, okay, oldest first, you're going to get this blessing. And him and his mother came up with this plan and said, this is not God's will, we're going to do God's will. And Jacob got the blessing and went forward with this blessing. And Jacob learned that lesson from the Jacob and Esau story, and now is reteaching this lesson to the next generation, to his son Joseph. Right? And so then in verse 20, he blessed them that day, saying, in thee shall Israel bless. Saying, God, make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said unto Joseph, behold, I die. But God shall be with you, and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. Not in their generation or their day, but the nation of Israel one day as a whole will return to that place, right? And he's saying these things and making these promises. And then he says, moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. So his father has set things in order. Things will go forward from here, and the chapters to come, you can read where Israel passes away, and they come together as a family, and then generation after generation passes, and the Jewish people from the children of Abraham grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, and the Egyptians are like, listen, these dirty stinking shepherds are going to outnumber us if we don't do something. Slavery. That's the answer. And it's a horrible answer. It's always a horrible answer. And even their form of slavery was not as malicious as the American form of slavery was. It's just appalling. Because even in Egyptian slavery, they're still considered people. They got around mistreating the slaves as not being illegal because they were like, well, they're not people, they're just slaves. And that's a horrible thing to say. And unfortunately, it's in some of our documentation and so forth, and which is a tragedy. But what we're going to be talking about next week is Moses. And the Hall of Faith moves forward into the life of Moses, and it talks about specifically him choosing to associate himself with the slaves of Egypt when he could have chosen to associate himself with the royalty of Egypt. And it's a beautiful picture. We see sort of the whole story of Joseph flipped on its head. And it's an amazing story that Moses becomes the first leader of Israel, and all the amazing things we see happen because of the choices he made in his life. And we'll be back next week with that lesson, assuming everything goes according to plan. And appreciate all you guys out here supporting and listening to the lesson. We'll be back on Sunday morning for our Sunday school lesson, continuing our series on the finding fruit in the fables of faith. All right, so until then, guys, bye.